Welcome to Convergence, Episode 4 on People for People Radio. Find out how the personal is political as we explore the politics here on Earth, the exopolitics of our galaxy, and dimensions beyond through my unique perspective. Today, we leave Earth politics and we move into the realm of exopolitics. I'm going to talk more about my paranormal experiences and introduce you to how I became aware of the Intergalactic Resettlement Program. This is part one of a three-part series, and I will start with some clarification and a bit of background information. In 2017, my guides told me that it was time to come out of the closet and make public my ET experiences and the knowledge that I received. Although I had had quite a bit of contact by this time, I didn't really want to tell people about it because, quite frankly, they just thought that I was off my rocker. And so it was hard to come out and to start going public with my experiences, but the more I did it, the better I felt about what I was doing. And my goal is not to convince anyone about my truth, but rather to educate those who are interested and inspire others who may also share similar experiences. My memories have spontaneously unfolded without hypnosis or regression therapy. They emerged slowly as I became more public with my experiences, but I still don't have full recall. I just remember what I remember, and I did not learn about this phenomena from research or books. I have reading comprehension issues, so I've read actually very few science fiction novels or even any books. I only know of my own experience, which is not really based on anyone else's work. Since I was in contact with various beings from other realities, I felt it was important not to do research about others who made similar claims. I wanted my experiences to be pure and not influenced by the experiences of others. After I went public through social media in the late 2018s, I started to compare notes with others, and I was surprised by the similarities in our experiences that we reported. It's important to note that I do not represent the beings from the Intergalactic Resettlement Program in any way, and I am not their spokesperson. I am no grand poobah to anybody. I only speak to what I know and experience for myself. Many of us have these experiences, but most people do not remember. Further, I don't have human language for all of my experiences, but I've chosen best that I can to relate my experiences and the concepts, etc., in common English. I have been encouraged by my spiritual guides to provide information so that people can make up their own minds about the options they may choose from for dealing with future world events. The Intergalactic Resettlement Program may become an option when our physical planet is in crisis or is transitioning and it's not safe to live here anymore. With all of the exopolitical contact that we hear about, it's important for you to know that I am not part of any Earth-based group, religion, politic, or philosophy, and I'm not part of the secret space program. I wish to stress that there is nothing to be afraid of. These off-world beings are absolutely benevolent and loving. They have a do no harm mandate, and they do not interfere with human free will. They may become involved in our lives when we ask for help and prove that we are serious by altering our lifestyle and our thinking so that we can hold sufficient frequency for contact. When the student is ready, the master appears. Depending on how ready we are, how open-minded we are, then appropriate contact can begin. This is our realm, and we have both personal and global sovereignty. This is our free will, and it will always be respected by benevolent beings. Further, I don't know species or racial names, planet names or group names, and my ET friends are not from any specific star system. This is an unorganized, frequency-based movement. And as I mentioned before, when we're ready, contact commences. On Earth, there are millions of us who share in the intergalactic work, and I was delighted to find out that I'm not alone and that my experiences are in no way unique. It's the policy of this ET group to suppress our memories before we return, so that we can remain embedded into the Earth's social and political construct for soul development. This is for our own protection, because even today, many humans have their rights violated as they are diagnosed with mental illness labels when they go public with their ET experiences. In the 1980s, the medical industry mostly switched from physical lobotomies to chemical, and this practice is one of the things that is holding back the spiritual and the intergalactic progress of the human race. So what can go wrong, or what can happen when we go public with our experiences? According to NRP.org, about 50,000 people received lobotomies in the United States. About 10,000 of these procedures were transorbital lobotomies. The rest were mostly prefrontal lobotomies. Walter Freeman performed about 3,500 lobotomies during his career, of which 2,500 were his ice pick procedure. In 1967, Freeman performed his final lobotomy on a patient who died from a brain hemorrhage. LiveScience.com claims that lobotomy is rarely, if ever, performed today, and if it is, it's a much more elegant procedure, Lerner said. You're not going in with an ice pick and monkeying around. The removal of specific brain areas, called psychosurgery, is only used to treat patients for whom all other allopathic treatments have failed. In the 1980s, they replaced this procedure with antipsychotic drugs and other psychotropic pharmaceuticals. ET contact is still considered extreme mental deviance, and so disclosure is often met with stigma, ridicule, and psychotropic medications which cause chemical lobotomization. This is why our memories are suppressed before returning to life here on Earth. This process is not some form of mental rape. We agree to forget, and we cooperate with one or two off-world beings who help us to bury our memories very deep. The memories are there, but we cannot access them until we experience a trigger of sorts. Sometimes we suddenly access a small amount of memory, and other times we remember quite a lot. Meditation and hypnotherapy can help. So I want to move now a little bit onto my paranormal history and my background, starting with the intergenerational contact that we have had. My grandmother, my maternal grandmother, was a healer and a midwife. My mother was an alternative healer and had psychic abilities, and then there's me, and I experience clairaudience, precognitive memory, other psychic abilities, as well as angelic and ET contact. I believe my maternal grandmother was altered on a genetic level so that she could maintain ongoing ET contact. Grandma was raised as a child in an isolated logging camp in eastern Canada, where she made friends with invisible beings. She would come back from playing in the woods and tell everyone about her friends. She maintained a close telepathic connection with these friends throughout her life, to the point where she had little use for normal social human contact outside of her immediate family. My grandmother had intuitive ways of knowing, and she was well known for her natural healing abilities. She never charged money for helping others. One day, a neighbor was recovering from back surgery, and he was in a body cast. The whole neighborhood was disrupted by his constant groans of agony. Well, my grandma sent a couple of my uncles out to kill a skunk. Now they had to kill it without disturbing it so that its stink gland was still intact. And as directed, they brought the stink sack to her. She cooked this up in a big pot with other ingredients like herbs and fat, and then she fashioned a large swab from a rag on a stick. She took these over to treat the suffering neighbor. Grandma dipped the swab into the solution and stuck it down the back of the man's cast. It brought him great relief, and the neighborhood was quiet again after that. Grandma's potion was the only thing that helped to ease his suffering. No one knew how she was able to come up with her healing herbs and concoctions, since she had very little education. But I strongly believe that Grandma's invisible friends helped her to know. So my mother told me about this, and she also told me about several other stories about how Grandma just knew when someone had a common health problem or an ailment. Grandma would go out, often taking the person with her, and have them pick different kinds of herbs and flowers and roots. And then she would take them home and she would make them a tea that always seemed to help. So going on from my grandmother's my mother, and I believe that my mother was either changed genetically or she carried the altered genes from her mother. And although the paranormal freaked her out, mother often displayed advanced psychic skills, ways of knowing and healing. She used these ways of knowing as an alternative healing practitioner, and she helped very, very many people, and she, like her mother, never charged money for doing this. I believe that Grandma was genetically altered, which made ET contact easier for the successive generations. I also have a niece who was very in tune with ETs since childhood. As a child, she used to wake up in the morning and produce drawings of very complex technology, unknown written languages, and interesting diagrams, which came to her while she was sleeping. And then on the other side of my family, there's my birth father, who was a pretty unusual person and possibly had ET contact. I don't know for sure. I was quite young when my mother divorced him, and later on he hand built a tiny little sailboat which he called Thumbelina. This always warms my heart because that's the book he used to read to me when I was a very small child. But after I was about 4 years old, I never saw him after that. I was just kind of felt good that he named his little boat after, called Thumbelina, partly because it was tiny, but hopefully also because he remembered reading that story to me. Anyway, he set off to sail around the world, and he traveled without any charts or any navigation equipment. He just used his instincts, and he sailed from Vancouver, BC, Canada to New Zealand, and then he went to Fiji, and then he ended up in Japan. And one day, while he and his little boat were out off the coast of Japan, they both went missing without a trace. And he was actually lost in what is called the Dragon's Triangle. That's very much like the Bermuda Triangle, but on the other side of the planet. And no trace of him or his boat were ever found. I have some newspaper clippings about it, and there was quite a few people who viewed him as a bit of a hero for the great courage he had to do that kind of traveling. So, due to my family history, I believe that I have the genetics for ET communication, and this multi-generational component made me a good candidate for much contact. And there is also a possibility that I may be a hybrid being. Now, I don't know for sure, so I'm not saying, but there is a possibility. So some of us are just ordinary people, but we have these extraordinary experiences. I believe we all share the potential for ET contact. I don't think contactees are special, but we have some genetics that have been altered, and many of us have experienced trauma, which gives us the ability to dissociate as it causes changes to the brain's receiver wavelength, and we become very, very good psychic receivers. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the conditions that prepared me for advanced ET contact. So when my mother was pregnant with me, she took a drug called thalidomide, which caused significant birth defects. Miraculously, I have my arms and my legs, but I do sense that there's something different about me as a result. Then I experienced periods of isolation and trauma, which allowed me to develop my gifts further. At only 3 months of age, I developed spinal meningitis and polio, which led to 6 weeks of isolation in hospital with almost no contact from my mother. Spinal taps were done on my tiny body at least twice while in the hospital, and I've suffered much neck and back pain all of my life as a result. But this was my opening up point to universal consciousness in order to survive. Babies need nurturing in order to survive. When they're neglected, they die. And here I was isolated at only 3 months of age and for 6 weeks, and somehow I was able to pull through. And I believe it's because I guess I just made contact with benevolent beings. At least this fits for me. Later, at age 4, my younger brother and I spent 6 months in an abusive foster care home, followed by my mother's remarriage to a sadistic man who thought that compassion was for wimps. He was very, very heavy-handed, and this resulted in much stress and insecurity throughout my childhood. Later, when I was 15 years old, my parents moved to another province without me. And since I could not yet provide for myself and I did not have any adult skills, I was preyed upon by strangers and severely abused. This resulted in further significant trauma. These traumatic experiences allowed me to dissociate to a place where I was open to interdimensional contact. Trauma causes us to become innocent like children. We have no energy for resistance, and this sometimes leads to benevolent, unseen forces that come in to assist us. Working through trauma is what has elevated me. The working our way through it reveals the gifts of forgiveness and compassion. Every trauma becomes a blessing as we heal. We become outstanding empaths. I learned that my experiences provided the perfect fertile soil for me to bring in my own inner resources. We go inside in order to go outside. We are fractal holograms. We are perceived as a part, but we carry the whole. We can access anything and everything by going within. So then I had my contact started in childhood. My paranormal experiences started around the same time that I found that I really hated social groups. They made me feel very stressed out, and I preferred to be alone. I had my own reality where I felt connected to nature. This led to my communication with bugs, plants, and animals, and I was open to contact with other realms. So, I've had people ask me, what do you mean by being a bug or a plant communicator? How is that possible? Oh, I know it sounds pretty strange, but it is very much true for me. So, for example, I was able to, I had a great compassion for bugs. I used to pick up caterpillars, and when it was raining out, I'd pick up worms and put them back in the grass and things like that. And I spent a lot of time around plants and bugs and little furry animals. And I found that I was able to actually communicate with them. Now, not in the way that you and I might communicate, but certainly the communication was very real. So, for instance, for bugs, I'm able to go into a wooded area where there's a lot of mosquitoes and no-see-ums and little flies and things, and I'm able to just ask them to please leave me alone and go find something else to feed on, and they do. And it's quite amazing. And I've had so many experiences. I'm not going to get into too much of that today. That could be a whole separate show. But the same thing goes with plants. And as I communicate with plants, they grow very lush. And if they're wild and they're just out around a property where I'm living, they will grow in towards me. So they just seem to be very attracted to me. And I'm able to sense what animals are feeling. And so that's what I mean by contact with them. And then, of course, there was the contact with the other realms. So my spiritual guides have always been with me, and we communicate without words. And I don't physically see them, but I am aware that they're with me. Also, I've always experienced quite a lot of missing time. Excuse me. Later, as an adult, I had the habit of missing social engagements, not just because I wasn't that comfortable going to them, but I lost favor with friends and family as I could not account for the time, where I was, or what I was up to. I had no explanation. And so people, sometimes thought badly of me because of not really understanding. And of course, how could they? As a child, I received loving support from my spiritual guides in the form of lucid dreams and spontaneous knowing. And whenever I tried to tell my mother or my family about it, they admonished me and said that I had an overactive imagination and I shouldn't talk like that because people would think I was crazy. Yeah, because see, my mom, because she had these paranormal abilities and they freaked her out. And so she didn't want anybody thinking that she was crazy, and she didn't want anyone thinking the family was crazy. And so there was some very strict taboos about me talking about my experiences. So I kind of internalized that and felt like there was something wrong with me when really there was nothing, and there is nothing wrong with me. I also had some special abilities, but my family told me they weren't real and I should stop talking about it. So I stuffed my paranormal experiences down deep. I always knew that there was so much more to life, and since I was spiritually minded, I joined various religions over the years to find the explanations for my experiences. Unfortunately, the ministers, the priests, and the pastors all taught me that this type of experience was from demons, and I was strongly discouraged from ever talking about it. It's not like today where we have the internet and we can look up all kinds of information. We didn't have any of that back then. The best we had for technology was the old rotary phones. So later, when I was in my late teens, I'd say around 1973, I had an experience with my younger brother Dan, who lived about an hour's drive away from me at the time. We were both receiving ET communications while we slept, and these communications were remembered as vivid dreams. Dan and I had the same experience, which doesn't surprise me as Dan and I are from the same mother and father. My other siblings and I share the same mother, but we have different fathers. We were invited to join off-world beings on a physical spaceship to another world. I was not talking about this because I thought I was imagining it, but the next time I saw Dan, he confessed that he was also having the very same invitation and experience. We decided to go, but the night that we were supposed to leave, we both received vivid dreams that we should not go because there was something wrong with the situation. The next day, Dan told me that there was a terrible accident and some of our off-world friends were killed. And that's all I know. I kept listening for contact back then, but there was only silence for a number of years. Shortly after that first ET encounter, my brother and I hopped the trains to Calgary to visit his girlfriend. She was one of Canada's top artists, named Gina, also Gerda Christofferson. Gerda was her legal name, but she went by Gina Christofferson. Gina was also a mystical intuitive, and one day as we gathered in a hotel dining room in Calgary, Alberta, with her two grown children, Monty and Nisha Christofferson, Gina revealed some startling information. Apparently, Gina, Monty, Nisha, Dan, and I were there at that very point in time by divine arrangement. Gina claimed we were the brethren of the white light, and we were here to fix the timeline and anchor in divine light and frequencies. I had no idea what this meant at the time, but in hindsight, Gina Christofferson was spot on with her prediction. So now I'm going to move a little bit into the adult contact. Once I was in my 20s, I was tired of feeling socially isolated, so I joined a fundamentalist Christian religion, got married, had babies, and attempted a normal life. I was looking for truth everywhere but within, and I saw so much shameful hypocrisy within my religion. Due to ignorance, stigma, and the shunning practices of the congregation, it was not safe for me to tell the truth about my paranormal experiences. I even got confused as to whether I was imagining things, as I embedded myself into a religion that taught that paranormal experiences were the work of Satan. I actually developed significant health issues from keeping this part of me so tightly suppressed. After I left religion for good in the 1990s, I realized that there was so much evidence to support my paranormal experiences that there was no way that I could have imagined it. And this actually led to a very deep personal and spiritual crisis. What happens when we are exposed to information that's outside of the box or outside of the mainstream way of thinking? We develop what is called cognitive dissonance, and we sort of violently reject that new information. But when I can't deny what I've actually experienced in the physical and the paranormal realms, and they are true, I have no choice but to reconcile the mainstream with the paranormal. And this is quite a big project. This is no small thing for many of us to face. And the work is quite difficult, and I think that explains why more people don't do it. So about the same time, I was going through a really rough life lesson, and I was consumed with grief and sadness. This significantly lowered my vibration, and I became imprinted by the spirit of a man who killed himself while living in the house that I was now renting. So I'll just tell you a little bit what was going on. I was having a very difficult time. I had recently left this religion. I had been a member for almost 20 years. And as a member of the religion, we weren't allowed to have friends outside of the religion. So over time, all of my contacts and my non-religious community, I had to let go of and lost contact with them. And I only had friends from within the congregations. And when I left, it is their practice to shun me as though I am a dead person. I don't exist. So I suddenly lost all the community that I had, all the supports, all the friendships. Everything was gone. And so, I didn't make that decision lightly. I have many reasons for leaving. And I guess the most prominent one is I just couldn't do it anymore. I just couldn't do it anymore. So at the same time, I was having some problems with anxiety and depression and getting oriented without this community that I had gotten quite used to after 20 years. And I was having some, like I said, depression, anxiety, and some mental health issues. And my former husband, who was remarried, said, well, let the kids come and stay with us. You can see them whenever you want. And it'll give them, give us a chance to have our turn at raising them, because he had had very little contact with our children since we had split up. And so I thought, well, children can't have too much love. They have my love, and to have more love from their father and their stepmother would be a good thing. So I let them go. And then once they were situated down there, it was too far for me to travel. I didn't have the money to travel, and he made it quite impossible for me to see them. And he didn't allow them to phone me or contact me. And it was really, really bad. And so I was feeling just an enormous amount of grief and loss, not just from the congregation and the spiritual contact, but also, contact with my children. It was pretty harsh. So what happened, I believe, is because my frequency was so low into grief and sadness that I picked up the vibration from this man who had offed himself in the house that I was now renting. And how do I know about this? Well, it wasn't until a couple of years later I made friends with a woman. And when she found out where I lived, she said, "Oh, I know so and so and so and so." I said, "Oh, I don't know who that is." She says, "Well, her son lived in that house before you lived there, and he committed suicide." And she told me details about it. And I had not told her details of anything about me having that impulse or that urge to do myself in at the same time. But what was interesting is the man committed suicide in a very specific way. And this was exactly the same way that I was influenced to die. And I talked a little bit about this in previous episodes, but I'm just getting into a little bit more of it here. So I was about to off myself, and then I had my profound angelic experience, which changed my life forever. So I always say I had this explosive vision of angels. Well, no, nothing blew up. There was nothing combusted, but it just was visually very explosive and very dramatic. And one voice sounded like 1,000 voices all speaking in unison, and it was pretty amazing. The angels appeared as points of light with light flashing out either side, giving them the appearance of wings. And the one angel who identified himself, actually not at that point, but later on, was Gabriel, the archangel, who came to me and shared messages with me that really, really woke me up to some very different life possibilities. It was then that I realized that we have tremendous value, no matter who we are or where we've been. And this is why angels are so interested in us, and they deeply love and cherish each one and every one of us. I learned that the beings from the angelic realms love us unconditionally, and there is nothing we can do to change this. All we have to do is have a willing spirit and make first contact to initiate the relationship. At that level, all parts of our life journey are sacred and fuel for soul evolution. We are intimately known, and nothing is hidden from these ones. So Gabriel told me that I could leave this life if I wished to, because there are exit points that each human can use when the going gets too rough for us to handle. Life is not meant to be unbearably painful. Gabriel alluded to the point that suicide is never unforgivable, because there are definitely reasons or people wouldn't do it. I was told that if I wished to stay here on earth, they would give me a helper. Now it was up to me to choose my own helper, and I was amazed by the suggestion. I needed to think about this. I had never heard of this before, and I wasn't sure that I was worthy or what the best kind of helper would be for me. And I was then told that when I was ready to just tell them, and they will know because they're never far away. Angels are incredibly merciful. After thinking about this for a couple of days, I decided on my gift and I asked for wisdom. I thought about all of the things that would give me the perception of power: money, popularity, beauty, but I knew these were not what I needed. I chose wisdom because then I could be of real benefit here on earth and know what to do to make a successful life for myself. Another thing that seemed strange at the time is after I chose my gift, I was asked if I wanted the quick method or the slow method. Now, the messages don't come across as in English language, so I didn't ask questions. I didn't really comprehend what I was being asked, so quickly answered, "I want the quick method." And I later found out that we learn from our experiences, and that rather than just having the wisdom pour into me, I had to live the kind of life experiences that would teach me about wisdom. So there's no shortcuts, is what I'm trying to say. So this led to much challenge and inspiration, but throughout it all, I was never alone. I was soon able to complete a university degree with distinction as a straight A student in 2004, even though I've got very poor reading comprehension. Yeah, that's a trip in itself. I actually got the intuitive hit to sleep with my textbooks, whatever class I was going to take the next day, to put that textbook under my pillow and to keep my textbooks around me while I slept. So I did my best to try to pre-read before the lessons, but I could read the same sentence 6 times and have no idea what I just read. I just couldn't generate the mental images for some reason from text words. Um, so, but anyway, I ended up, I would go to class the next day, and the instructor would ask us questions, and I knew the answer to everything. It was really cool and very strange. And, although I did try to study, I spent most of my time and really got good grades, mostly from my research papers. And it took me maybe 35 hours to do one paper. But I did it, and I passed with flying colors, so that was pretty neat. Later in 2007, I was able to survive a horrifically botched surgery, which resulted in significant physical disability, mental torment, and loss of life skills. I think the hardest part about it is here I had just a few short years, 3 years before, been the straight A student. I was a scholarship student, and then after this botched surgery, which resulted in, I'm not going to talk about it too much because it could be a whole show on its own, and it's pretty disturbing. So let's just say that I had went in for a very minor procedure, and they accidentally made cuts throughout my digestive system so that I leaked my own body fluids, my body waste, into my body. And that filled up my lung cavities, so my lungs couldn't inflate, and I got severe oxygen deprivation. But also, I had a very bad reaction from the anesthetic, and I got a condition which was called delirium. And I still struggle with this today. And that's why I often need notes and things before I do public speaking, because it causes like when I want to speak about something, I could start on one subject and end up on a completely different subject. I wasn't able to maintain um, the concentration and to stay focused. And so everybody thought I was a drug addict and I was on drugs and stuff. And oh man, I couldn't communicate with people. It was pretty frightening. But uh, and even today I'm still working on it. So it's taken me great courage to go public and become a public speaker, because I never know if I'm going to be able to make sense to people. But as I continually practice, now it's 2021, and I've been practicing since 2007 when it happened. And I'm actually getting to the point where sometimes people don't notice, which I'm really super happy about. But anyway, although life threw me a lot of curveballs, I was able to overcome each obstacle one at a time and cope with the assistance of my guides. Seriously, I don't know how I would have made it through without them, but true to their word, they were always there for me. And so I've always been connected to my guides, and I'm even connected today. I don't have to do anything special. They're just here with me. That I really got that lesson while I was in hospital with that botched surgery, because I had all these beliefs, I had all these experiences, and here I was 5 weeks in the hospital, hooked up to all these machines and experimental drugs, and oh my gosh, it was like really, really, really scary situation for me. And I went, well, you know what, Karen, this is either real or it's not real. And if it's real, if my spiritual life is real, then now I'm going to put it to the test. And, I couldn't go out to be around spiritual people. I couldn't join a church or a group or anything like that because I was in the hospital. I just asked everybody, all my guides, just come and be inside with me. And so they are. It actually is quite amazing how that works. So I work for the Archangel Gabriel ever since then, from December 21st to March 21st each year, fulfilling missions and completing exercises for soul development. Then about 2010, I started to experience extraterrestrial contact again. The feelings of intense love that I received from them indicated that these beings were good. I just knew that contact agreed with my pre-birth life agreements that I had set up before I was born. And I also believe that I have extensive contact with these beings beyond my 3D body. So it's like my higher self makes contact sometimes with and sometimes without my conscious awareness. Lucid dreams and remote viewing are regular features of my contact experience. Sometimes I get spontaneous knowings and downloads. It takes seconds to receive a download, but it takes time to unwrap and synthesize the data. So for example, I received the basic concept for the quantum health transformation program in an instant, but it took me nearly 2 years to unpack the concepts and create the program. Then in 2012, I received the call to level up and notice Earth changes, all physical, political, and spiritual. What do I mean by level up? Well, I noticed that my introspection became much deeper and more authentic. And I was able to discover things within myself that needed to change on a much deeper level. I also noticed some weird things happening in the sky and some interesting transformations that were spiritual. Then in 2013, I received a download and began using the Nubby Ball tool, which is explained in step 9. Then in 2014, I received the rest of the quantum health transformation download, and I started to downstep the information to create the free online course. In 2015, I became aware of some ongoing intergalactic ambassador work that I was doing, and I didn't travel there physically. I remained in my bed, sleeping, but my consciousness was definitely transported to the big ship each night. Physical presence is not needed to do the ambassador work. At first, it was unsettling to wake up in the middle of the night to use the washroom, while also being present at meetings on board the big ship. Although it bothered me at first, I found that my ET associates didn't seem to mind at all. They're amazing, amazingly compassionate. So it's important for me to mention that there is a time differential between Earth time and intergalactic time. I was taken every night for about 3 months Earth time, but I experienced it for more like 3 years in ET time. So time is very different there. And for one thing, they're not bound by the rotation around the sun with a 24-hour day. And then there are times when I'm also outside of my physical existence where time and distance do not exist. So it makes sense that I was returned before waking up in the morning, even though I experienced being gone for weeks. I have no physical proof of my off-world adventures, but I do have some very vivid memories, and I sure have learned a lot. After this, I began to do more research, and I found out about Dr. Stephen Greer's CE5 movement back in 2015, and I was greatly encouraged by Paul Hellyer and the Disclosure Conference, which I found out about at the same time. As a result, I started to meditate and reach out for even more contact. So I just want to say a bit about my real-time sightings. Okay, so these are sightings of UFOs or experiences I've had with them while being awake here on Earth and fully conscious and fully present. It's interesting that many people report that they have contact experiences soon after seeing UFOs, and I'm no exception. So here's an overview of my physical real-time sightings. So the first one I will call Headlights Over the Water. I was driving up the island highway on Vancouver Island one evening after dark, and I was getting tired, so I pulled off the road and pulled off to the side of the road to take a bit of a break. It was too dark to recognize any of the surrounding area, but I knew that I was overlooking the ocean and possibly some islands. I soon noticed two lights, which looked like headlights on another car, which would have been facing me at a distance. I thought to myself, there must be a nearby island with a parking lot facing the highway. Soon I pulled back onto the island highway, but I noticed that as I drove north, the headlights kept pace with me. I immediately knew that this was not another car, because if it were, it would have to face the same direction as me and both headlights would no longer be visible. It was kind of thrilling as the lights kept pace with me for about 10 miles until I came to a nearby town. I knew that there was nothing out there but water, and this must have been a UFO. Then, just to be sure, the next time I drove up island, I stopped at the place where I first saw those headlights. There was nothing out there but water and the coast way off in the distance. Another experience involved a cigar-shaped interdimensional craft. I just happened to look up one day, and way up there in the sky, I saw a metallic gray cigar-shaped object. Less than a second later, a circular rainbow appeared at one end of it. The rainbow then slowly engulfed the object, and it appeared to shorten as it was drawn into the circular opening in the sky. Once it completely disappeared from sight, the rainbow portal also disappeared. I've seen saucers at dusk in the clouds. Many times I've seen saucer-shaped objects sitting within the clouds at dusk. As the sun sets, it casts an kind of eerie, interesting kind of light up to the clouds. And the clouds start to become kind of transparent. And then just before the sun disappears below the horizon, the saucer-shaped objects become very visible. Another experience involved a fireball. Again, while I was traveling north on the Vancouver Island Highway, I noticed a big, sparkling, golden copper-colored ball with a tail, which came down out of the sky on an angle and landed out of view at the top of the low mountain range to my left. I was about 100 yards below the impact site, yet there was no noise, there was no vibrations, and I seemed to be the only one who noticed it. When I got home, I did an internet search for any news about a comet or other space debris that may have been noticed in the North Nanaimo area, but there was no news about it at all. And of course, orbs of all sizes. I have seen many orbs of various sizes. Some appear to be small and some are very large, even about 6 feet in diameter. They do not appear to be solid or metallic. One day last year, I was sitting on my bed and I saw one roll right through the wall, across the room, and then through the outside wall. It was very strange. I just kind of went, that's interesting. Compared to some of my other experiences, it certainly was not unsettling in any way. And I've also seen others that appear in the sky, and I'm not sure if they're smaller or if they just appear to be smaller because they're further away, and I've never actually interacted with them in any way. I get a funny feeling before I see a UFO, like the urge to look at the clock and you see 11:11. This might be an interconnection of consciousness. I just happen to look up at the right moment. I also believe that they want to be seen. Otherwise, why would they use lights at night? I'm sure that they have the technology to fly in the dark. And why would they need to appear at all if they didn't want us to see them? So next week in part 2, I will introduce you to some of my ET friends, their culture, and details about the big ship. If there's time, I'll also talk about the orientation process for first-time visitors to the big ship. But pretty much this concludes part 1 of this part 3 series. Please let me know if you have any questions about the Intergalactic Resettlement Program, and I will do my best to answer them on the next show. You can email me at forbiddentransformation@gmail.com. Join me and bring your friends as we go live at 1 p.m. Mountain Time every Tuesday here on People for People Radio. I want to give a special thanks to Gaz and Vanessa for hosting me on People for People Radio. And also much love and light to you, the viewers. And thank you for sharing your time with me. If you would like to enjoy more of my content, check out my website at www.karenholtonhealthcoach.com, where you will find an abundance of free resources to assist with energetic ascension into physical, mental, and spiritual paradise. There you will find the 9 steps to quantum health transformation. This is a free, no strings attached, comprehensive, online lifestyle course, the same course I talked about during the show today. The Quantum Guide Show also offers interviews with awakened masters. Let them share their quantum work with you. Also, Forbidden Transformation with Karen and Chris. This is a bi-weekly show that I co-host with Chris Matthew of Forbidden Knowledge News. And from that show, you can learn how to make positive ET contact, improve your life, and find your experiencer community. I also offer the Fringe View. Science fiction becomes science fact as you learn about my real-life paranormal and extraterrestrial experiences from my various podcasts. And if you would like to support my work, check out my online shop where you will find Zendome's Orgonite, my unique brand of orgone generators. They're ethically sourced, handmade, and double charged for maximum effect. I also have comfort crystals, a limited collection of energetically infused semi-precious stones, lifestyle services, which include workshops, assessments, and of course, one-on-one support and coaching. And I also have PDF downloads, which are printable, shareable copies of my lessons. So my website again is www.karenholtonhealthcoach.com. That's KarenHolton healthcoach.com. You can email me at forbiddentransformation@gmail.com. And of course, you can reach me here on People for People Radio, www.peopleforpeople.ning.com. And then, of course, check out my YouTube channel. It's at www.youtube.com/C/Karen Holton TV. And that is about it for today. I want to thank everybody. Oh, sorry. It says, okay, I've got a chat here from a message from Vanessa. Can I talk about the visit with the artist? Where were you all? Oh, okay. I think you're talking about, the question is, can you talk a bit about the visit with the artist and how were you able to help do it? Okay, so this happened back in the early 1970s. And like I said, my brother and I, we hopped the trains. No, we didn't buy a ticket. We actually hopped the trains illegally and we traveled to Calgary, Alberta. And we met up with Gina and her family. And that was my first time meeting them. And it was just this very short experience where we stayed with her for a couple of days. And one day we piled into her car. She drove a Grand Am, a pretty sporty looking Grand Am. And we went into town and we went to this hotel and we were having tea and coffee and a snack in this big hotel dining room. And it was a round table and we were all sitting around, and Gina's grown son and daughter were also with us. And all of a sudden, Gina just kind of went in a little bit of a spaced out look on her face. And she just said, "We are all members of the Brethren of the White Light. We are meeting at this time by divine appointment. And together and apart, we will do amazing things. We will help restore the timelines, and we're going to anchor in divine energy to help correct things on Earth." Now, at the time, I didn't know what to make of it. And it wasn't long after that Gina's life went on a separate route to the lives of my brother Daniel and myself. We actually lost contact with her. That was it. That is the whole story. There wasn't any more to the experience than that. And I actually forgot about it until the last couple of years when I started to have my memories unlocked and I started to remember more. And I remembered back to then and I went, oh my goodness, this is absolutely significant. She couldn't have been more right. So, I think really what she was getting at was the light bearers, Vanessa. And there are millions of us on Earth today doing the light work. So I think that's what she was referring to. And yeah, it's too bad I actually lost contact with her. It wasn't until very recently I was able to find her son on social media. And apparently she passed away in 2012. But she was a very good soul and a brilliant artist. If you look up her work, you will find her quite easily on the internet. And yeah, that's all I have to say about it. So now I only have a couple of moments left. Doesn't look like there's any more questions from the viewers. So I'm going to just end by saying a lot of contact is facilitated by having a healthy body. We live in a very toxic environment, all of us. Our water is not that clean anymore. A lot of us face additives like chlorine and fluoride to our water. Our food sources have been contaminated. If we are participating mostly in mainstream entertainment, our minds are being affected. The greedy commercial system is an economic system, is constantly brainwashing us with millions of symbols to buy crappy food-like substances and things like that to eat. And we're losing our close connections with family and with friends, and things are just not the way they were meant to be. And but with a certain amount of intention, we can change some of that. Maybe we don't have access to cleaner air, or maybe, we don't have always 100% access to clean food. But what we can do is start to take good care of our minds and our bodies and our souls. And when we do that and we start to exercise a bit of self-love for ourselves, what happens is we are energetic beings and it changes our frequency. It changes the content and the subject matter of our energetic selves. And that makes contact so much easier. There are supplements and things that we can also take, but basically it really boils down to developing self-love. It might mean creating and developing an internal parent that helps to take care of us so that we eat properly and we get to bed on time. And we just start not making contact with people who are overly dramatic or don't have our best interests at heart. And all of that self-love is going to pour back into you and make you more able to contact, and prayers to be more profound, and to bring all the things that we want into our lives. So until next time, much love, and thank you for joining me.